Hello, everyone. Hi, Agama.
Hi, Alex.
Apologies for taking so long, but I was having problems with my laptop and I was trying to fix them and they were finally fixed.
Yeah, great to have you here again today. Thank you all for being patient with us today. So Alex is our speaker for today's demo workshop session, and he'll be leading the workshop session on token economics. Alex is the partnership and grants manager of Unit Masters, and is also a marketing manager of Blockchain Netherlands Foundation. Alex holds a bachelor's in international business management, and he's currently pursuing a master's in blockchain and digital currency. He holds the Chartered Blockchain Expert certificate, and his professional background is in PR, marketing, event organization, and open public blockchains. Alexandros fell in love with cryptocurrency because he values individualism, freedom, financial inclusivity, and censorship-resistant political money, as he believes that a handful of politicians, no matter the country, cannot represent and decide for whole nations of millions of people. Alex hopes by using this technology, he can help build a better financial world than the one we currently live in. So it's really great to have you here again today, Alex. And without taking too much time, please go ahead.
Yes, indeed, because there was already some time taken because I was trying to fix my laptop. So as you said, let's start. Can you all see my screen? I have created a small presentation about token economics. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, your screen is up.
Wonderful. So basically how we're going to do this is I'm going to give you an overview of what money, let's say, is, what token economics is, and then we're going to see different, let's say, how do you call it, categories of currencies, of tokens, how they're basically being used in terms of token economics, of course, right? And then I'm going to also show you, we're going to also talk about a few certain different, let's say, and how do you call it, problems, let's say, or faults that people are doing when they're trying to implement token economics, basically, and they're doing it in their own way. And at the same time, we're also going to see a few successful ways of this, let's say, being done. And that's more or less it. And we're also going to have one or two Q&A sessions between the presentation, of course, as well. So I hope you're ready, and let's start. So as I said, when you talk about money and when you talk about a currency, there are basically three uses of money or of a currency, right? That is store of value. This means that it is generally resistant to loss of value, meaning that, let's say, when you have, let's say, a euro or a dollar, you do not want it to lose its value quickly, because you want it to how do you call it, to contain its value, so that you can basically use it as a medium of exchange, which is a second, let's say, use of money, right? So, a medium of exchange is basically an intermediary item like money that someone is using to exchange products, right? Because if you're using, let's say, products to exchange one product with another, that is barter without money, right? And barter is quite inefficient in terms of economies, because it's efficient if there are like very few people within an economy, maybe a very small village or a very small secluded community, of course, where each other knows one another, and they can say that, let's say, a haircut costs, let's say, 1 kilogram of meat or something like this, right? But generally speaking, barter is very inefficient in bigger economies, because let's say you want to buy an airplane, right? How many haircuts would that take for, let's say, the person that does have, let's say, the airplane? How many haircuts will that person have to take from you in order for you to buy the plane? For instance, I'm giving you a very let's say, out of the box example, but basically this is it, right? And then you would not be able, and also the person would not want a haircut every day, right? So then barter becomes inefficient, and this is why we're also using money, because it basically allows it to be an intermediary of exchange, a medium of exchange, where we can, where we kind of agree that this money, let's say this item, is being used as an intermediary for me to give you, let's say, $5 for a kilogram of meat. I'm just coming up with the numbers out of my, let's say, mind at the moment, right? And that I can give you, let's say, $10 or $20 for a haircut instead of bartering with the items themselves. And finally, unit of account, which is measuring the value of an item or of value to someone, right? So if you go, let's say, to a pizzeria or to a cafeteria, you will see that a coffee is priced in dollars. This is basically what it is, right? You're using it to say, okay, a coffee costs $3. This coffee costs $3. A second coffee, let's say a macchiato or a cappuccino, costs $4. Juice may cost $5 and so forth, right? So these are the three kinds of uses of money: store of value, so that you can basically, it holds the value, it does not lose it, in order for you to use it as a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. But we also have to kind of keep in mind that money does not fulfill these three uses perfectly, right? Because when it comes to store of value, when you have dollars or when you have any kind of currency, you have something that is called inflation, right? And what inflation does, it evaporates the value of the money as a store of value, right? Ideally, this is done, of course, in the long term. Let's say you have an inflation rate of 2%, 3%, normally 4% every year if you're in a stable country. But you have, of course, other countries like Venezuela and other countries where basically even now, like even in, let's say in even in more financially stable countries, you kind of have a rate of 10% inflation. And this kind of basically evaporates the store of value, how do you call it, use, which of course gives a completely different way of using it as a medium of exchange, because you will need more dollars to buy your kilogram of meat. And of course, as a unit of account, you do not say anymore that the kilogram of meat costs $5, but you kind of write it as $7, right? So the fact that you have the kind of the store of value, it's kind of plays with the other ones as well. And there is no, at least for the moment, there is no perfect way of storing value for forever, using it as a medium of exchange and having it as a unit of account as well. So let's talk now about token economics. We kind of have to take that into consideration for the next, let's say, slides and for the next presentation. Just keep it in your mind. You don't necessarily need to know it by heart or something, unless if you want to, but just keep it in mind for the next slides, right? So you have token economics, which is basically the creation of an economy which uses different incentives to encourage people to play by the rules of an economy and not cheat, right? And this is utilized in different ways, basically, in cryptocurrencies, in platforms, in utility tokens, in security tokens, asset tokens, crypto collectibles, and crypto fiat and stable coins, of course, as well, right? We're going to see how basically this is done. And let's kind of see what cryptocurrencies are, what platforms are, what utility tokens are, what asset tokens are, what crypto collectibles are, like in a very short overview, of course, as well, right? So here we kind of also can see a bit like the token economics of, let's say, Bitcoin, which is the most well-known cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrencies are basically mainly currencies that you're using as a medium of exchange and as a store of value, but for the long term, not on the short term, because of their volatility. So basically, if you look at Bitcoin, in the short term, it's volatile. It is 10,000 today, $10,000 today, $20,000 tomorrow, let's say, right? Not, but in the long term, you can basically see through its token economics that it basically holds value and it even increases it, right? So the way that Bitcoin works is through something that is called proof of work. And what proof of work does, it's basically incentivizes people, let's say the miners, to play by the rules in order to add more Bitcoin into the economy, right? And that's how basically the economy works. So average block time of, let's say, of Bitcoin is 10 minutes. This is basically if you kind of look at Bitcoin, it's a blockchain, right? So each block on the blockchain contains transactions that you and I basically are doing, right? The max supply of Bitcoin is 21 million, and the circulating current supply is 18.8 million, right? So in order for us to understand how Bitcoin incentivizes an economy that is basically, where in theory no one is cheating, it's basically through proof of work. And how this happens is that in order for someone to add a block in the Bitcoin blockchain, they have to engage in something that is called a proof of work, right? So this is basically using a lot of computers, let's say, and the energy that these computers can generate. So think of them a little bit like a capital, right? So you're kind of using money, you're putting your capital up front by consuming this energy. And by consuming this energy, you're basically solving a very difficult mathematical puzzle, right? Think of it a bit like 1 + 1 = 2. Of course, much more difficult. This is just a very basic way of me giving you a small example, but basically it's a mathematical puzzle that basically human brains would not be able to comprehend because it's very, very difficult. And this is why you also kind of need the energy for that to happen. And what happens is that by the fact that the person that uses the computers uses this energy to add blocks into the blockchain, this is kind of like the token economics in some way, part of the token economics, which is basically they spend the energy, and thus if they do not add, let's say, the block into the blockchain, they're not going to get more Bitcoin, right? Because every single time that people put a block into the blockchain, let's say, they get, in the Bitcoin blockchain, they get Bitcoin in return, right? Like, for instance, you put something like, let's say you spend $1 million in, I'm just giving a random example, $1 million in energy to put a block into the Bitcoin blockchain, you get 100,000, let's say, as reward in Bitcoins, which you later sell to make, to make a profit, of course, right, for what you're doing. And how this basically works is that people, in theory, could use this energy to, instead of add blocks into the blockchain, to remove blocks from the blockchain, right? But the problem here is that you're using a lot of energy. So it's not going basically to work, because if you would remove, let's say, blocks from the blockchain, then that would mean that you're not getting any kind of reward for it, right? So basically you're just consuming your own resources, and that would not work. It's a bit more complicated, of course, than that in some ways, but this is kind of like the basics, right? And the other, let's say, part of the token economics of Bitcoin is that it has 21 million as its max supply, as probably many of you have known, right? So that makes it resistant to inflation, right? And this is how it basically works. But then, of course, one of the things that people say about Bitcoin is that it does not produce anything, but it does produce Bitcoins, basically the currency. And so the only, let's say, problem for the moment, at least for Bitcoin, is that it's just vulnerable to supply and demand, right? When there is a lot of demand for it, the price skyrockets. Most of the times this happens when you have the Bitcoin halving, which is every 210,000 blocks, or more or less every 4 years. The demand goes up. Well, the block halves. So basically, the demand goes up, and at the same time, the price goes up. And then at some point, how do you call it? The demand goes down, and the and the price goes down as well, right? Then you have Litecoin, which also uses proof of work. Well, before we go to Litecoin, to any other ones, are there any questions about Bitcoin? Because if you can't understand Bitcoin, then it will be a bit more difficult to go through the token economics of other cryptocurrencies. Are there any questions up to now, Agama?
None at this time.
Okay, great. So then you have Litecoin, which is a bit like Bitcoin, but it has a max supply of 84 million. Its average block time, every time a new block is added, every 2.5 minutes instead of 10 minutes. And how do you call it? And basically the circulating supply now, I think, is around 60 million. I'm not basically sure. I haven't checked. I'm not using Litecoin that much, but that's basically it. Some other cryptocurrencies are Monero and Zcash. These are, let's say, privacy coins, as opposed to Bitcoin, which is basically what happens is that Bitcoin's transactions and Litecoin's transactions you can see on a public blockchain, while Monero and Zcash make it so that your transactions are much harder for someone to see. And of course, this could basically, well, it's part of the token economics and of the technology, of course, as well. Like they do have a supply as well. They have their own consensus mechanism, like I think proof of work. Monero is using proof of work as well. I do not remember the average block time to be, how do you call it? To be truthful with you. But what the Monero basically blockchain uses different cryptographic techniques to enhance privacy of people. And this can be used in two different, of course, ways. This means that people, let's say, that are quite shady could use it for illegal activities, right? Theoretically speaking. But it's also good for people in, let's say, oppressed countries. If you're a journalist living, let's say, in a country that is not very, how do you call it? Very tolerant toward journalists and the kind of journalism that you're doing. Let's say you're very against your government in some ways, then Monero is a really good way of, let's say, supporting the journalist. But of course, then you go into ethics and everything. And this is not the aim of this class, of this session, but I'm just giving you a little bit as an idea of how it works. Then you have Zcash. It's a bit similar to Monero. They kind of use different, again, different technologies to use to enhance privacy, and green as well is used. Zcash, I think, was also even created by Edward Snowden, if you guys know him. And green is also another cryptocurrency that is being used as a medium of exchange and as a store of value long-term, that basically enhances privacy in order for people to do transactions, of course, as well. Then you have platforms, and most of these platforms, or all of them, are using proof. They do not use proof of work, they use POS. This is proof of stake. And how this consensus mechanism works and encourages people to, how do you call it? To play by the rules in terms of token economics. Of course, each of these platforms has their own cryptocurrency, and they have their own supply, max supply, circulating supply, which you can Google and see how it basically, of course, also works, the average block time of each, of each blockchain. The average block time of each blockchain helps in terms of scalability, of course, as well. But it is very difficult to say, let's say, to create to change the average block time, right? For instance, with Bitcoin, what happens is that you have the block time every 10 minutes. And why is it that 10 minutes and not 11 minutes or 12 minutes, right? So with Bitcoin, when it was created in 2009, you kind of have to understand that you have to strike a balance, of course, in its technology and its token economics, so that people that are using the network and have slower internet connection can participate as well, right? So if you make it so that it is not 10 minutes, but it is, let's say, 9 minutes, especially in 2009, 2010, people with slower internet connections would not be able to process kind of like the transactions as a node in the network, right? And then that would make Bitcoin much more vulnerable to attacks. I think you probably have read the triangle of the blockchain trilemma, where you kind of have the centralization, security, and scalability. And what happens with Bitcoin is that it has a layer 2 now, but in the beginning, of course, what Bitcoin had was, it was completely decentralized as it is now. It's the most decentralized cryptocurrency for the moment. And of course, it has, it's very secure, but it was not very scalable at that point, of course, as well, because you kind of have this blockchain trilemma that everyone is trying to solve. On platforms, you have proof like Ethereum, Binance, Polkadot, Cardano, and Stellar. You have proof of stake. Each of these platforms are not using the same model of proof of stake. They kind of have changed it. Some of them are more centralized, some more decentralized. You kind of take trade-offs, right? Like, for instance, Binance Smart Chain is very centralized at this moment. I think the people that maintain the network are, or let's say the computers that are maintaining the network are around 10 or something. So it's highly centralized, but you are basically able to have scalability and security instead with the model that you're using, right? But how proof of stake works is, instead of using energy for people to put capital up front and play by the rules of the economy, let's say, in terms of creating the economy, you're basically taking, your own money. Let's say, I'll give a random example in terms of Ethereum, right? Or Polkadot. Let's say Polkadot, you take, let's say, the money, and what happens is that you take $10 of your, let's say, money, you put it in a smart contract, and you kind of say, okay, the next block that I'm going to add onto the blockchain, I'm going to do so, truthfully, and I'm not going to cheat. And when you do not cheat and you add the block onto the blockchain, you get your money back, let's say, plus the cryptocurrency dot or ether, and then you can sell it to make ends meet, right? If you do not do this, basically, if you cheat in some ways, let's say, then what basically happens is that the smart contract takes away and you're not truthful, then the smart contract takes away your money, right? So you kind of, do you see basically how token, this like very basic token economics, of course, right? But it's basically incentivizing people to play by the rules of an economy and create an economy where people can basically participate. Do we have any questions now, Agama?
Yes, there are a few questions here.
Yes, tell me.
So we have the first from Ganesh, who wants to know what's the basis for fixing 21 million for Bitcoin.
What is the basis for what?
For fixing 21 million, like Ganesh, if you're there, you might want to expatiate on that question.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the maximum supply of Bitcoin was fixed at 21 million by the creator.
Indeed.
It was in 2008 or 9.
Yep.
So, like, what was the on what basis he has fixed 21 million? Like, what future he has foreseen on that time?
That's a good question. That's a good question to which I don't think anyone has an answer, because he published a white paper and he explained, of course, how Bitcoin works and everything, but he never said or expanded as to why he decided that the max supply of Bitcoin would needs to be 21 million. I can tell you, as we will see later, why he did not decide for it to be, let's say, 10,000 or 1 million, and why he did not decide it to be, let's say, 100 quadrillion or something, right? I'll tell you why. Because if you have a supply that is low, right, what happens is the price of your currency goes really up in terms of, how do you call it, of value. But what happens is that people would not want to use it because the supply is too low, right? On the other hand, if you have a supply, as I said, of 100 quadrillion, you have a supply that is too much and it's not valuable enough, right? Now, Bitcoin can be used perhaps, if you want, as a benchmark of 21 million. Some people say that, maybe Bitcoin's 21 million is like, some people do say that its supply is still too low, and you have like coins, like for instance Litecoin has 84 million supply. Some other cryptocurrencies have more supply and everything, right, or less. So it depends, of course, always on what you want to achieve in terms of when you create it, right? But in terms of why 21 million by Satoshi, that's something that really no one knows except for him. Or maybe even he doesn't know. Maybe he just said, okay, just let's create 21 million, right? Does that answer the question in some way?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Yeah, that drives to another question. I'm sorry, I've just finished up in a minute. So 21 million is supply-wise is too much. So whenever we have more,
no, it's not too much. It depends on what you want to achieve, right? Like Bitcoin as a store of value, long term, is very, very, very good. At least in the 13 years that it has existed so far, its value has increased, right? So as a store of value, it's a very good way of doing this, right? So, and it's deflationary, because every single time that a block is added, the person that adds the block into the blockchain gets Bitcoin, right? And every 4 years, this Bitcoin halves. So we started in 2009, every 10 minutes, a person added a block into the blockchain, and they would basically get 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes, which they would have to sell in order to recuperate the power, the energy that they used in order to produce it, right? So in the beginning, you had 50. After 4 years, it became 25. Then it became 12.5. Now I think it's 6 something and 612 or something like this. And in the next halving, which has to be somewhere in 2024, the how do you call it? Bitcoins that will enter the economy will become 3.125 per 10 minutes, right? So with the way that he created the token economics of Bitcoin, you kind of get, you just basically, it has been designed in such a way that as long as people use it, the price will always go up every 4 years. So as a store of value, it's a very good way of creating it, right? It's not too much or it's not too little. Of course, if you have a completely different mindset and you want to create something new, right? Let's say you want to create a currency that would be used for universal basic income, right? This would mean that maybe you would need a completely different supply, making, let's say, deciding on what the supply should be. Maybe it's not 21 million, maybe it's 42 million or even more. So I don't want to say that it's too much or too little for what it was trying to achieve. At least the supply is, at least for the moment, perfect. But the point is just that other people that have created other cryptocurrencies for different purposes, they kind of criticized Bitcoin for its supply being either too much or too little. But as I said, it depends on what you would like to achieve. Does that answer the question? Wait, you haven't even asked the question, right?
Okay. We do have two questions that are quite closely related. Yep. And this is Ruben, who's trying to know if the supply amount is fixed and cannot be altered with time. Mm-hmm. And then there's another question that wants you to explain max supply.
Yes, so basically what happens is, well, max supply, this means that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin in existence. That means you have circulating supply, which is how many Bitcoins exist right now. But if you do the mathematics of Bitcoin, in the year 2140, you're going to have the last Bitcoin mined, and the maximum supply of Bitcoin in existence ever in 2140, when the last one will be put into the circulation, will be 21 million. Not 22 million, not 21 million and one, just 21 million. There won't be more than that. That's what max supply is. And I hope that answers the question. And Agama, what was the second question?
So the second question is, okay, just a moment, please.
Yep.
Oh. Well, I'm trying to read up. Mm-hmm. You've answered max supply, and the second question is, he's trying to know if the number can be altered with time. The 21 million. He wants to know if it can be altered with time.
There is something that is called, there is something in the technology called forks, right? Like a fork with which you eat meat or anything, let's say, right? And like fork and a knife. But what a fork means in the technology of blockchains, let's say, is that you create a second blockchain, right? So if someone would go and alter, whether that is Ethereum, well, Polkadot has no forks, but let's say Ethereum or Cardano or Bitcoin, right? In Bitcoin's case, as we said, 21 million, if someone within the network would go to the code and write, that instead of 21 million, Bitcoin has to have a max supply of 100 million, they would just fork the blockchain, meaning they would create a second copy of the blockchain, which does not follow the rules of the first one, and they would be the only ones using that blockchain. And these blockchains would not communicate with one another, right? So basically, the original, let's say, Bitcoin blockchain would not know of the other fork, and people who would not use the new blockchain would not basically use it. And in that case, you do not, as long, let's say, as people stick to the idea of 21 million and do not go to another, let's say, blockchain, then it would never be altered, right? In terms of supply. So meaning, like, you cannot alter the supply of the original Bitcoin network, but you can create a new one. But the problem here with that one is you have to create your own community which will use that currency, and you have to justify why you created this one and not using the original one, let's say. And if people agree with what you're saying, then they may use it. Otherwise, no. But if you look at the original Bitcoin community, they're very, very, very conservative, and they're not using anything other than Bitcoin, basically, right? They even say that every other cryptocurrency in existence is what they call a shitcoin, basically. So they were open-minded as people to change, let's say, from fiat currencies to Bitcoin, but they're very close-minded in terms of new ideas now, and they kind of see Bitcoin as this currency that will become the currency of the world in a few years or a few decades. I hope that answers the question. Do we have any other ones, Agama?
Yes, we do have a question here concerning forking. When and why would this occur? Does it create security issues?
No, well, no, it doesn't. Well, that's a good question, right? So does it create security issues? It does not create security issues to the original blockchain, because you're just creating a second copy. So think if you have like an Excel file, right? It's sort of like copy and pasting a new Excel file, which is basically kind of like the same, right? But in the blockchain's how do you call it? Case, what happens is that the security of the second blockchain may be compromised because it does not have as many users or as many miners to protect itself, right? Because the more people use, let's say, a blockchain, it comes a bit more technical than that, but I'm just going through the very basics of it. But the more people use a said blockchain, especially when it comes to proof of work, the more secure the blockchain is. So if you would create a second Bitcoin right now, it would not be secure as Bitcoin, as the Bitcoin that we basically know, right? It would be much more vulnerable to attacks. And there have been forks. There has been even forks of Ethereum. It's called Ethereum Classic. And Ethereum Classic is not as secure as Ethereum, and it has been compromised a few times. It used a 51% attack and everything because they do not have as many users as Ethereum, let's say. And I hope that answers the question. Anything else, Agama? Any other questions?
Yes. Yes, we're actually short for time. But we do have one question here. It says, the word mining, is it the same as proof of work or proof of stake?
So mining only is possible in proof of work. And when it comes to proof of stake, you have validators instead. So miners are in proof of work, like Bitcoin, like Litecoin, like Monero. These are the people that add blocks into the blockchain and get more money, which they afterwards sell, are basically called miners. In Ethereum's case, in Polkadot's case, in Binance's case, in Cardano's case, and every other blockchain that uses proof of stake or proof of burn or any other, let's say, consensus mechanism, they are called validators instead of miners. I hope that answers the question. So we should go on a little bit quicker, because as Gama said, we are running out of time.
Yes.
Then you have utility tokens, and I have 4 examples, of course, as well. Here you have basic attention token. This is basically, let's say, a token that instead of using it only as medium of exchange, it has more of a utility kind of thing, right? So what basic attention token does is it's used on the Brave browser. I don't know if you know this, like maybe most of you use Google Chrome, but there is also Brave. That's basically a Web3 browser. And what it does, it blocks advertisements, basically, right? It does not download advertisements from websites. And there is a way that basically you can click on the advertisements to be shown. And whenever you see advertisements, the advertiser is basically paying you for your attention, for the fact that you're looking at the advertisement in basic attention tokens, right? So the utility of basic attention token is the fact that you're basically, the utility is that you're watching advertisements in order to be paid in it, right? Fanfare token is basically a token that you're using in order to play to play in casinos. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of casinos or anything. I don't like gambling, but it is what it is. It's one of the utilities of the utility of Fanfare token. You kind of use it in order to participate in casinos. You have Filecoin. This is basically a coin whose utility is storage. It's decentralized storage. So you kind of know probably Google Drive, where you can use where you can store your files, right? Filecoin, on the other hand, what it does is basically, let's say you have a computer, you can, how do you call it? Rent the capacity of your computer, let's say, someone else to store their files. And because you rent the space of your computer, your megabytes, well, you have to start with terabytes. It's from 10 terabytes and onwards, right? But whenever you kind of give your megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, the person that actually stores the files is paying you in Filecoin. Then you have Ava, that is basically a token of Travala. And the fact that you're using Ava allows you to go on Travala, which is basically a website where you can book flights and hotels. And if you use and hold Ava, then they kind of give you discounts instead, right? So these are basically utility tokens, which they have kind of a use that either you hold them for some reason, let's say, and this basically gives you certain privileges, or you can use them in some other ways. Then you have natural asset tokens as well. For instance, Earth token, this allows you to trade, let's say, land and everything, basically, right? You have Power Ledger, that is basically another, and Sun contract, more or less, they're the same. They're basically tokens that allow you to buy and sell electricity globally, right? So kind of like you can have someone from Nigeria buying, let's say, the electricity in the rates of Nigeria and selling it to someone in Norway, and kind of like making a profit from there as well. Then you have non-fungible tokens, Bored Ape Yacht Club, CryptoKitties, and CryptoPunks are the three most well-known ones. Non-fungible tokens, what they basically do in terms of token economics is that they're incentivizing people to hold their token in order to be part of a club or of a community, kind of, let's say, right? CryptoKitties, in their kind of way, it's more like, as we kind of saw, more like of a video game thing. But in terms of Bored Ape Yacht Clubs and CryptoPunks, it's about creating a community of people who share the same values as you, and you kind of come and meet together in, let's say, how do you call it? In meetings, you have your own network, you help one another, these kinds of things, of course, as well. You have stable coins, which are normally pegged to an asset or a fiat currency. You kind of have USDD, you have Tether, you have Binance, you have DAI, and stable coins can be decentralized stable coins, and they can be centralized stable coins. They're pegged, let's say one USDD represents $1. And if you go to the headquarters of the Circle, of the company that issues this token, and you give them USDD that you have, they will give you physical dollars back. So basically, for each let's say for each token that they create, they buy $1 in reserves to represent that token, basically. Any questions here before we go with mistakes that have been done with tokens, vesting schedules, and fundraising?
Okay. We're actually at 3:59 in terms of time. Just so
okay.
Yeah, just so you know that. So the question we have here is Abubakar wants to know if it's safe to use Brave Wallet to store tokens.
Which wallet?
Brave Wallet.
Yes, it's a self-hosted wallet, a digital one, so it's safe to store your tokens there.
Okay, so I see Stacy doesn't have a problem staying beyond 4 p.m. Okay,
I see.
and so Alex, I think you can go on. There are no other questions here.
It's already 5 o'clock, so it's until 5, right? So we're almost out of time. So what I would propose is, well, I'm sorry for the problem that I had with my laptop, but what I'm proposing is I'm going to share the presentation with people so that they can basically read it. It's very in detail from afterwards, so they kind of can read and learn about it. Do you think this is the best solution, or would you like me to continue, because these are the two solutions that I see?
Well, yeah, we also have the Telegram chat, and they can post questions there, and coupled with this PDF, which I think it's a good idea.
Indeed. Thank you, everyone, and I'm really sorry for the problems that I was having with my laptop. I hope you at least learned something from the presentation that I managed to give you today, and I'm going to share the rest of with you so that you can learn, you can go through the whole of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. And
hey, Zach.
Hey, Zach, it's nice to see you.
Yes. Happy to be here. Always happy to hear you talk about these things, kind of create what are the possibilities and potentials for the future. I just want to say congratulations to all the master's students and participants and experts that are here in this room. This is really an exciting journey. And I wanted to offer you all something. You may have already seen it in the chat, but I am leading the City Growth Initiative at UNIT. We have over 8,000 members in 60 plus cities around the world right now. And I'm really looking to grow that and to bring in a lot of you to your local ecosystems so that you can either add value to your communities, but also continue your own growth, potentially find collaborators, move on to the UNIT Ventures Accelerator, where you get to build your own Web3 businesses. And so I just want to say in the chat, I dropped in an invitation to join the cities, and you can see what cities we have currently. And if there's not one that's close to you, I would recommend just joining one of the regional ones. And it'll be a great way to keep up with, whether there's conferences or hackathons happening, whether there's job opportunities coming up, or if you just want to go on and discuss, so maybe there's something new in the news and you're like, hey, what do you guys think about this? And then you can have those conversations. And so you'll find in the chat a little bit of information about the city programs, the city chats. And you can just DM me and tell me, hey, Zach, I'd love to be part of New York or Nairobi, whichever one you would like to be part of, and I'll send you an invite. The other thing I wanted to say was I am looking for ambassadors, people who can help me moderate and curate some of those groups, right? So that's very simple, not very much work, just in terms of like saying, there's a new person in Abuja and you say, hey, welcome, what are you working on? And then we kind of create that community feel where we actually know what people are doing, right? And helping to connect people. If people have questions, you can point them in the right direction. And and offer opportunities. So I share opportunities with the city ambassadors, and then they can share that with their communities, right? And you'll see that probably you already have in the new like daily dispatch, which is just a little bit of an update of what's happening. And keep an eye out for one later today, which is specifically about some of our Unit Masters participants, and will be an opportunity for all of you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you, Agama. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Joy, everyone else here.
Okay, so Ruben, you're asking for a link. Could you specify which link? Okay, so the presentation will be shared in the Telegram chat for everyone. Yes. Please go ahead.
I mean, the link, the direction Alex is giving us, where can we join him?
Okay. So it's a PDF. It's actually in the chat right now. If you look in the chat, you find it. You can click on the blue arrow to download the file, and you'll be able to use the information there. Aside that, it will also be posted in the Telegram chat after this session.
Correct.
All right. So thank you so much, every one of you, for staying till the end. It's always a pleasure to have you here every Thursday and every Friday. So we look forward to next week, which will be the last week of the Unit Masters Cohort 13, and we hope to see just as many of you and even more joining in. If you haven't filled the survey, please do so. I'll also be sharing that link. Again, please tell us what your Unit Masters experience has been like. Let us know how it has helped you. So thank you so much, everyone, and happy holidays. See you next week. Bye.
Happy holidays. Okay.